Well, welcome back, and I hope you all had a good night of rest, and I hope that your day has gotten off to a good start. I know we've lost some students to this storm, and we need to remember to pray for them as they travel home. We're going to pick up this morning where we left off yesterday. Yesterday we ended up by talking about vulnerabilities, some of the vulnerabilities that children have that lure them into sex trafficking. Today is going to be a little bit hard. What we're going to talk about is a little bit difficult, but there's no way we can sugarcoat it. We would be doing a disservice to these victims if we tried to do that. So we're going to start by talking about some of the terms that we used in the definition. We talked about grooming, we talked about recruiting, we talked about targeting, and I think the best definition for grooming is where that trafficker fosters a relationship and gains that trust of the child. Now, the grooming process begins when that trafficker first meets that child, and it ends when he begins to sell that child for sex. And this is a process. It's a process where that trafficker or perpetrator will gradually gain that child's trust, and the child has no idea what's going on, and that what he really is going to do is to exploit him or her. Now, the grooming process can vary depending on the type of trafficker that we have, and also depending on the situation that that child is involved in. And so we're going to talk about 3 different types of traffickers this morning. And the first one is the family member. And we refer to this as familial pimping. Most cases of familial pimping will occur in an environment of abuse, an environment of neglect, where that child is offered up for sex in exchange for, many times it's for drugs, money to buy drugs, many even maybe to pay bills. It can be a mom, a dad, it can be a brother, a sister, an aunt, an uncle. In fact, a couple years ago, I read about a grandmother that was trafficking her little granddaughter. So the very people who are supposed to be watching over and nurturing and taking care of these children are willing to sell them for sex. Now, you don't know me that well, but I am deathly afraid of spiders. And traffickers are master manipulators. They spin a web of lies and false promises in order to gain that child's trust. Now, I am afraid of spiders, but I also am quite interested and enjoy looking at some of the webs that they spin. When I'm in my garden and I see some of these beautiful webs that they spin, I'm just so surprised. And one day I was walking up to my mailbox, and it's one of those upside down capital L's, and I saw a spider web, and I kid you not, it was about this big. It was thick, it was perfect, and I bent down to take a closer look at it, and right in the middle of that spider web was a big old fly just flapping its wings trying to get out. And I thought, that is a perfect picture of what trafficking is. That trafficker spins that web of lies in order to get that child's trust, and he makes false promises, and that child gets stuck in his web just like that fly got stuck in that spider's web and cannot get out. Now, we still have people in our country who believe that every one of these trafficked children have been kidnapped. This is false. Most of these children have not been kidnapped or abducted and forced physically to stay with that trafficker. The majority of these victims include some type of psychological manipulation, or maybe what we want to call brainwashing. According to the Polaris Project, which is one of the oldest anti-trafficking movements in our country, only 10% of children that are trafficked have been kidnapped. The rest of them are controlled through psychological manipulation. Most of these kids know their trafficker. Most of them either have known them for a while or have gotten to meet them recently, and only 10% have been kidnapped. Now, traffickers, they go to malls, which are big recruiting grounds. They go to coffee shops, arcades, anywhere where kids hang out. And these traffickers have this sixth sense where they can recognize a child who has low self-esteem. And they will strike up a conversation with that child, get to know them, find out what their weaknesses are and what their needs are. And then they will use that at a later date against that child. There are some traffickers who will pose as modeling or as photographers, and they are these famous photographers, and they've got lots of friends in the modeling industry, and you are so beautiful, I know that we could get you a job in the modeling industry. I could tell you story after story of girls who were lured in this way. And one comes to my mind. I don't have time to tell you her whole story, but one thing she said to me after she had been rescued, she said, I should have known when I went into his apartment and he had 7 phones that there was something not quite right. And she said, now looking back, I think about the fact, if he was a famous photographer, how could he photograph me the next day? But she said, I wasn't thinking about that. All I was thinking about was what he was offering me and the wonderful things that he was offering me. So here we have this 16-year-old girl with a brain that's not fully developed and being lured in that way by the trafficker. Right now, the major means of recruiting, and I think probably will be going forward, is social media. Now, how does a trafficker select his victim? Well, pimps target kids with low self-esteem, kids who are having trouble at home. They target kids who have run away from home, kids who are looking for attention. And they look for kids who have needs. And whatever that child needs is what he will do for them. And he will meet that need. In other words, if they are looking for love, lots of times teenage girls are, he will be their boyfriend. If they are looking for a loving father, which lots of times kids in foster care are, he will be their protector. If they're lonely, he'll be the friend. So whatever they need, he will meet that need for them. And then after he has selected his victim, he begins to court his victim. And now we're going to talk about a different kind of trafficker. We call him the Romeo pimp. And he's going to be a compassionate listener, and he listens and finds out that child's vulnerabilities and what their needs are. And it's during this stage, and this is important to remember, during this stage is when he appears to care for that child, to love that child, and this becomes the foundation of all the psychological control that he's going to have over this child. Now, after that relationship becomes exploitive and becomes abusive, which it probably and usually does, remember this, that child is going to reflect back on this time when she thought he was in love with her and buying her all of these wonderful presents, and she will do anything. She will do anything to get back to this former relationship or this time of courting. This period of courtship can last for a couple days, or it can last for a couple months. That trafficker is in no hurry because he knows how much money he's going to make from that child. Now, I have up here Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and you might be thinking, what in the world is that doing up there? But you may remember this from your classes. It's a giant triangle, and our greatest need is at the bottom, and it goes up from there. And traffickers, some of them knowingly and some of them unknowingly, use those first 3 levels of Maslow's hierarchy of needs to lure in their victims. So let's take a look at them. The first one, our greatest need is at the bottom. These are our physiological needs. These are things that we cannot live without. We need food, we need water, we need shelter. On a day like this, we need warmth. And then the next one up from that is safety and security. We all want to feel safe. We all want to feel like someone's protecting us. Someone has our back and we can count on them. And then the third one up is love and belongingness. Who of us does not want to have friends? Who of us does not want to be loved? We all do. And we all want to have intimate relationships with people. And these kids are no different. And these first three levels of Maslow's hierarchy of needs are said to motivate people when they are not being met. So in his conversations with these kids, finding out what their needs are, he finds out and then he uses these first three levels and meets them if they're not being met. And he can be sure that he's going to have a victim. Now, as he listens to that child's trouble, he establishes himself as his or her savior. And the next thing that happens to this child is when he begins to isolate her. And he wants to put a wedge in between anybody that she cares about and her. He'll talk derogatorily about if it's parents or friends. He'll put them down. He'll try to turn that young lady against these people who she loves or who love her. And he's going to turn her against anybody who might object to their relationship or anybody who would question their relationship. He wants to be in total control of that child. That child becomes financially reliant on him during this isolation period, and she becomes totally reliant on him and feels that she needs him for her existence. Now, after this isolation period, the grooming process is going to come to an end. It comes to an end when that trafficker begins to introduce the idea of prostitution to this child. He may say something like, well, I know what your dreams are. I really want to make your dreams come true. You want to go to Florida, and I really want to take you there, but my car's broken down. If you'll just do this, we'll have money, and I can get my car fixed. We can go to Florida. We can get a place on the beach. We'll get married. All of these false promises he makes to her to lure her in to prostitution. He may put it a different way. He might say, well, look at all of I have done for you. I love you. I've bought you expensive gifts. I've gotten your hair done. I've gotten your nails done, given you a place to stay. I've done all this because I love you. You say you love me, but you've done nothing. You've done nothing to show me that. If you love me, you're going to do this. Another one that they use is, it's only going to be this one time. If you just do it this one time, I'll never ask you to do it again. But what traffickers usually do that first time is they videotape what's happening to that child, and they keep that videotape as a way to threaten them and coerce them. If that child would threaten to run or not want to do what they're being told, he'll say, I'll send that video to your youth group, or I'll send it to your school or your family, and they'll see what kind of a person you really are. And that child does not want anybody to see what has happened to her and what she's doing. And so he uses this videotape that has been made to coerce her into doing what he instructs her to do. Now, we're going to talk about a third type of a trafficker, and we call him the gorilla pimp. And that's exactly what he is. These guys use violence. They use manipulation on the kids right from the get-go. They're not like the Romeo pimp who gives them gifts and gives them compliments, gives them protection and security. They begin right in by using physical violence on that child. And they do this to show their power over them, to show their control over them. And this is called breaking the victim. Now, the Romeo pimp also does this after he has lured his victim in, but this gorilla pimp starts with that right away. And these kids do what they're told because they're frightened of him. Once that child is engaged in prostitution, that trafficker begins to change the way she looks at the world. He humiliates her. He makes her feel like she's worthless. He uses shame on them. He takes the guilt that she's feeling, and he talks to her, excuse me, about ways people look. I'm sorry. Oh, thank you. I'm not used to this cold weather. He uses shame on them, and he makes them feel like they have absolutely no value other than him, and they begin to feel more and more dependent on him, and that's what he wants them to do. Now, I think this is a good time to remember what I said about 5 minutes ago, that these kids will do anything to get back to that time of courting, that time where they thought that he loved them and they had this relationship. They'll do anything, including allowing themselves to be sold into prostitution, just to try to get back to this courtship time. Now, I wish I had time to talk to you and share with you about the trauma bond that occurs between a victim and a trafficker. And this trauma bond keeps that child bound to the trafficker, keeps them from running away. It's very similar to what we see in domestic violence. But I don't have time to go into that, and because I never, ever want to end a presentation like this without giving you ways that you can help and ways that you can become involved. In fact, there are some of you out here who may be doing things to help to fight trafficking and not even realize it. So let's talk about what Christians can do. First of all, we have to, and I think we all have, come under the biblical conviction that God is a God of justice. When we read our scriptures, Old and New Testament, I don't think there's many chapters that don't talk about God's love for justice and his hate for injustice. We need to be willing to look and learn about the nature of evil, the nature of oppression. We can't look away while this is happening to our children and adults. What I've told you the last 2 days is just the tip of the iceberg. There's so much more that you need to learn about what is happening to these children. This isn't a job for just a couple people who are passionate. It's a job for the whole Christian community. We all probably know by memory Micah 6:8, where it says, "He has showed you, O man, what is good. And what does the Lord require of you? To act justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly before your God." You know, our Bible is filled with promises. And one of my very favorite promises, I think since I got involved in the anti-trafficking movement, is what John wrote in Revelation 2:15. And he said, "And he who was seated on the throne, and he who was seated on the throne said, 'Behold, I am making all things new.'" I know you probably, just like me, were so looking forward to the day when Jesus makes all things new and puts an end to all the injustices. But we don't know when that's going to happen. It could happen today. It could be many, many years down the road. And there is work to be done. There are some specific ways that you can become involved and some specific ways that you can help to fight human trafficking. And I'd like to go over some of them with you this morning. And hopefully some of you will become involved in our fight against human trafficking. One of the most important things that you can do is to pray. I don't know what I would do without my prayer team. They pray for me and they pray for our organization, and God has answered in amazing ways. So pray for the individuals who are victimized. Pray for these victims, that they would be rescued and that they would come to know Jesus. Something that was very hard for me in the beginning and when I got started was to pray for the people who were trafficking these children and the people who were buying these children. I just couldn't do it. And then God is so gracious. I got to know some of these men who had been traffickers and pimps who came to know Jesus. And Jesus transformed their life, and now they're doing what I'm doing. They're in the anti-trafficking movement. And they can do and have access to places where I wouldn't have access to and can do things that I can't do. And so please don't forget to pray for these people who are traffickers and who are buying our children. 99% of our buyers are males. And then pray for our political leaders, that they will pass laws that have to do with human trafficking. Pray for our victim advocates. These are people in law enforcement who work with our victims, who help them to get the services that they need and the help that they need. Pray for the anti-trafficking community. Pray for us. Pray for the leaders of our groups. Pray for our volunteers. Pray for our board members. And then, number 2, become well educated on this issue. As I said, I just gave you the tip of the iceberg. Make sure that you understand this subject. Learn as much as possible about what life is like for a sex trafficking victim, and then educate other people. I've had people say to me, hold their hand up in my face practically and say, don't tell me, I don't want to know. I don't want to know about this. We can't do anything about it if we don't know about it. So educate yourself about trafficking. Volunteer. Look for opportunities to volunteer in homeless shelters, in pregnancy centers, and places like that, because all of these centers and shelters are serving trafficking victims, and sometimes without even realizing it. And then become a trained volunteer for an anti-trafficking organization. We need volunteers so badly, and we need volunteers that stay. Sometimes people will get a heart for trafficking for about a week, and they come and then they're gone. But if you feel God has put this on your heart, volunteer and then stick with it and help us who are in this anti-trafficking movement. Be informed by inviting people from anti-trafficking organizations to speak at your maybe college groups, your churches. We have presentations for hospitals and schools and rotaries, everything. And so we love to come out and share and get people to become involved in fighting this crime. Now, the next one, most of you out here cannot serve as a foster parent, and I understand that. But maybe when you're older, you would consider being a foster parent. These children need Christian homes. They need homes that are stable, people who love them unconditionally. But there is something that you can do for foster children, and that is to become a guardian ad litem, or sometimes in some states it's called CASA. And what this is you are paired with, you go through a training, and then you're paired with a foster child, and you help that child navigate through the legal system. These kids don't have anybody. They don't, they have to go to court. They have no one there to go with them. And so you could be that person to mentor them and go through the legal system with them. Also, mentoring in our schools. I don't know if your schools have mentoring programs, but Rivers of Justice has a mentoring program in our school. And when we started thinking, how can we serve these children who are at risk? We started looking at what is the root cause of children who are trafficked. And one of these things is that they don't have a significant person in their life. They have no one that's significant. And the trafficker comes along and he will be that significant person. So if we can match these at-risk kids up with mentors, they can be a significant person, they can have relationships with them, they can care about them and build trust with them. So think about the possibility of mentoring an at-risk child. You can do fundraisers for organizations that are fighting trafficking globally or in your community. We always appreciate that. We're so busy that it's hard to even have the time to do fundraisers. So if you would do that for a group, they would be very blessed by that. Or donate to a group. Encourage your elected officials. I don't know if there's anybody out here who is interested in working in legislation and political science, but encourage your elected officials to pass laws so that we have stronger penalties for these buyers and for these traffickers. Support legislation on the local level, on the state level, and on the federal level. And one thing, when you do this, it's an effective way to respond to the gospel of protecting the poor and the oppressed. And then don't look at porn. As evil and degrading as pornography is, there's another reason that we should not be looking at porn, because porn is part of our problem. If you're looking at pornography, you are perpetuating that satanic industry of sex trafficking. Most of these individuals, all of these individuals are victims. It is not a victimless, pornography is not victimless. Most of the individuals who appear in pornography are enslaved individuals. They've been trafficked, they've been drugged, they've been manipulated in some way, and they are forced to be part of this business. So pornography is like a gateway drug. When you start looking at it, you can become addicted to it and want harder and harder pornography. And pornography is fueling the commercial sex industry, and it is heightening the demands for our victims. So I would just encourage everyone to not look at pornography. And then in closing, learn how to identify a victim of sex trafficking. We didn't have time to do that, but if you go on my website, you will see ways to identify victims of sex trafficking, especially children. And then use this number that I have up on the screen and call the human trafficking hotline number if you see something and you think, that really just doesn't look right. Maybe you're going to be traveling home for Thanksgiving and you stop at a rest area and you pull up in this rest area and a van load or a SUV load of young girls pulls up and you think, this just doesn't look right. There's a guy driving, or maybe even a man and a woman, because they do oftentimes work together. You think there's something here that just doesn't look right. So the human trafficking hotline would rather you call and be wrong than not call and be right. So if it doesn't look right, call them and tell them. They'll want to know where you are. Tell them what you're seeing, why you're concerned. They'll want to know where you are. They might ask you, what kind of vehicle is it? What's the make and model? What's the color? Is there any way, are they out of the car? Can you take a picture, snap a picture of the license? And what they will do is, after you have hung up, they will have someone from the FBI or somebody from law enforcement come in and investigate this. And so please, if you see something that doesn't look right, always call that number. Put it in your phone and keep it there. Like I said, they would rather you call and be wrong than not call and be right. We always say, see something, say something. But please, please, please don't ever try to rescue a victim. This is for law enforcement to do. This is for the FBI to do. Traffickers are dangerous people, and I would not want you to put yourself in harm's way. So, in closing, these are some things that you can do. And in closing, let me just say that the work of injustice is very hard. It's very difficult. It can be very messy. There's a very real enemy out there at work, and he doesn't want his deeds being exposed to the light. When you get involved with the human trafficking organization, you know what spiritual warfare is. Satan is fighting for our children, and these people are violently oppressing our children, and they are benefiting from our children at their expense. To quote Gary Haugen one more time, he said, the work of justice will require patience, persistence, and courage, and that's so true. But I would like to add something to that. More than that, it's going to require faith. However, if we persevere, if we are persistent, Isaiah tells us in chapter 58, verse 10, and if you spend yourselves on behalf of the hungry and satisfy the needs of the oppressed, then your light will rise in the darkness and your night will become like noonday. So my challenge to you is to go out and shine a light on human trafficking. Let's close in prayer. Our God and Father, we praise you because you are a righteous God. You're a holy God. You are a just God. But you're also a God of mercy and love and grace. And we praise you for this. Father, I commit this time to you and these students to you. Lord, I pray that you would lay this burden upon some of their hearts to go out and work to protect our children, work to prevent them from becoming victims of sex trafficking. And Father, I pray that you would speak to their hearts. Father, I thank you for this privilege of being here with them. And Lord, I pray for each one as they travel, that you would give them safety and a wonderful Thanksgiving with their family and their friends. Father, we pray for the ones that are traveling right now back to Buffalo. We just ask that you would watch over them, keep them safe, help them to get home before the snow begins. And Lord, I pray for this college. We thank you for these students and their heart for you, their love for you. We thank you for the faculty and the staff, and we're just grateful for the light that they have been over the years. So we want you to know that we love you, and we are thankful for you, and we want to serve you. In the strong name of your Son, Jesus, we pray.